When she inherited the last 80 acres of her family's broken-down farm, she thought it was a final, quiet goodbye. But when an oil company bought the 3,000 acres surrounding her, what she discovered buried on her own land wasn't just a secret, it was a declaration of war. If you've ever felt small against something huge, or had to fight for something no one else understood, hit that subscribe button. This story is for you. The day I turned 18 felt less like a birthday and more like a discharge. There was a sheet cake in the common room of the Northgate Group home, the frosting the color of a chemical spill. The other girls, some of whom I'd known for 6 years, sang a version of Happy Birthday that was flat and tired, a ritual they'd performed for dozens of others who had aged out before me. Mrs. Albright, the house supervisor whose smile never quite reached her eyes, handed me a large manila envelope. My name, Alara Vance, was written on the front in her perfect, sterile cursive. Inside was my birth certificate, my social security card, a bus ticket to downtown, and $78 in cash, the remainder of my state allowance. Freedom, apparently, cost less than $100. I folded the money into the pocket of my jeans. It felt like a stone, not a key. I spent most of the day in my room, a small cube with a window that overlooked a brick wall, packing the few things I owned into a single black duffel bag. Photos of my parents, their faces faded and smiling from a life I barely remembered. A stack of worn paperbacks, a small, carved wooden bird my grandfather had made for me before he died, its wings smooth beneath my thumb. He was the reason I'd ended up here. His sudden heart attack, my parents already gone years before in a car crash on an icy road. There were no other relatives, just the state with its endless forms and beige-colored rooms. The silence in my room was a heavy blanket. For 2 years, after Grandpa's passing, I'd been in a fog of grief so thick I couldn't see the hands reaching out to me. By the time the fog started to lift, I was 14 and labeled unresponsive, a ward of the court. Northgate became my address. It wasn't a cruel place, not really. It was just empty, a holding pattern. You learn to make yourself small, to not want too much, to keep your head down until the clock ran out. And now it had. My duffel bag sat by the door, a small, sad punctuation mark at the end of a long, run-on sentence. I took one last look around the room. There was no part of me left in it. The bed was already stripped, the bare mattress staring up at the ceiling like a closed eye. I didn't feel like I was leaving a home. I felt like I was being transferred. The difference was, this time, there was no destination waiting for me. Just that bus ticket and the vague instruction to check in at a transitional housing shelter by 9 p.m. I walked out of the room and didn't look back. In the hallway, Mrs. Albright stopped me. "There's one more thing, Alara." She handed me a different envelope, this one crisp and white, made of thick, expensive-feeling paper. It was addressed to me in typed, formal letters. "This came by courier this morning, from a law firm." I turned it over in my hands. The return address was for a firm I'd never heard of, Davies & Cole, attorneys at law. It felt impossibly heavy. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I have no idea," she said, her tone clipped and professional. "It's addressed to you. It's your property now." That word again. Property. Like the $78. I tucked the letter into the inside pocket of my jacket, the corner sharp against my ribs. I said my goodbyes, which were awkward and quick. A few of the younger girls hugged me, most just nodded. They knew the routine. You leave, and you're gone. It's cleaner that way. As I walked down the concrete steps of Northgate for the last time, the cold November air hit my face. It smelled like rain and exhaust. I clutched the strap of my duffel bag and started walking toward the bus stop, the lawyer's letter a strange, warm weight against my chest. I had no family, no home, and no plan. I thought I had nothing. I had no idea how wrong I was. The law office of Davies & Cole was on the 12th floor of a glass tower that seemed to scrape the gray sky. It was the kind of building I'd only ever seen in movies, with a lobby so quiet you could hear the soft whir of the security cameras. A woman with a sleek, severe haircut and a voice to match directed me to an elevator that moved so smoothly I felt like I was floating. The door opened onto a hushed, carpeted world of dark wood and the faint, clean scent of paper and lemon polish. A man was waiting for me. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with kind eyes crinkled at the corners and a tweed jacket that looked soft and worn. "Miss Vance?" he said, his voice gentle. "I'm Arthur Davies. Please, come in." He led me into an office with a window that spanned the entire wall, offering a dizzying view of the city below. From up here, the world looked organized, logical. It was a lie, but a beautiful one. I sat in a leather chair that sighed as I sank into it. It was the most comfortable thing I'd sat on in 6 years. Mr. Davies sat behind a large mahogany desk, but he didn't hide behind it. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "First," he said, "allow me to offer my belated condolences for the loss of your grandfather. Thomas was a client of mine for many years. He was a good man." I just nodded, a lump forming in my throat. No one had mentioned my grandfather in years. It was as if he'd been erased from the official record of my life. "He spoke of you often, Mr. Davies continued softly. "He was very proud of you." I looked down at my hands, at my scraped knuckles and the worn fabric of my jeans. I didn't feel like someone to be proud of. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. He smiled a little, a sad, knowing smile. "Thomas left a will, Ilara. He appointed me the executor. The terms were specific. Everything was to be held in trust until your 18th birthday. That was today." He slid a thick folder across the desk. It had my name on it, just like the envelope from the group home. But this felt different. This felt real. "Your grandfather didn't have much in the way of cash," he explained, opening the folder. "After his medical bills and other debts were settled, his savings were almost entirely depleted. But he did have one asset. His sole asset, in fact." He paused, looking at me carefully, as if gauging my reaction. "He left you his property. The farm. 80 acres of land, the house, the barn. It's all yours, free and clear of any mortgage." The words didn't seem to connect in my brain. The farm. I had a faint, dreamlike memory of it. A big, white house with a sagging porch, the smell of hay and damp earth. My grandfather's calloused hands showing me how to skip stones across a small, murky pond. I was 5, maybe 6, the last time I'd been there. After my parents died, he'd moved to a small apartment in the city to be closer to me, renting out the farmhouse to a string of tenants who never seemed to stay long. For the last several years, it had been empty. "The farm," I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. I thought it was gone. Sold." "He refused to sell," Mr. Davies said. "Many times. Even when he probably should have. He was adamant that it stay in the family, that it be there for you." He slid a set of keys across the desk. They were old and iron, attached to a simple brass ring. "These are for the house." I stared at them. A house. My house. The idea was so enormous it felt dangerous, like a trick. People like me didn't get houses. We got shelter beds and lists of rules. "There are some complications, of course," he continued, his tone becoming more businesslike. "The property taxes are in arrears for the last 2 years, about $6,000. The state was close to seizing the property, but I managed to delay the proceedings until you came of age. You'll have 90 days to pay the back taxes, or the county will put it up for auction." My heart sank. $6,000. He might as well have said $1 million. The $78 in my pocket felt like a joke. "I don't have that kind of money," I said, the hope draining out of me as quickly as it had appeared. "I'm aware of that," he said calmly. "Which brings me to the second matter." He pulled another document from the folder. It was a letter with a corporate letterhead. "This is an offer from a company called Petrocorp Development. They've been buying up land in that area for the past year. Large parcels. They now own the 3,000 acres that completely surround your grandfather's farm. Your 80 acres are, essentially, an island." He let that sink in. "They've made a standing offer to purchase your property. A very generous one." He turned the paper around for me to see. The number at the bottom had a lot of zeros. $350,000. I felt my breath catch. It was an impossible, life-altering amount of money. Enough to go to college, enough to get an apartment, a car, enough to be a normal person, enough to be safe. "They want the land for oil exploration," Mr. Davies said. "It's part of the Blackwood Shale Formation. Their preliminary surveys suggest a high probability of significant reserves. Your property is small, but it's preventing them from having a contiguous block for their operations. It's a nuisance to them, so they're willing to pay a premium to make it go away." He leaned back in his chair. "The offer is more than fair, Ilara. It's my legal duty to advise you to consider it very seriously. You could pay the back taxes and still have enough to start a life anywhere you choose. A very comfortable life." It was the perfect solution. A clean, simple answer to a problem I didn't even know I had an hour ago. Sell the land, take the money, leave the past behind. It was what any sane person would do. And yet, I looked at the old iron keys on the polished desk. I thought of my grandfather's face, the way his eyes would crinkle when he smiled. He refused to sell. He was adamant. Why? Why hold on to a failing piece of land, go into debt, just to hand it over to a granddaughter he hadn't seen in years? It didn't make sense. "What if I don't want to sell?" I asked, the question surprising me as much as it did him. Mr. Davies raised his eyebrows slightly. "That is, of course, you're right. The land is yours. But you would still need to settle the tax debt within 90 days. And I must warn you, having a major industrial operation as your only neighbor will not be pleasant. The noise, the trucks, the environmental impact. It would not be the quiet country life your grandfather knew." He was right. It was a stupid, sentimental idea. I was an 18-year-old girl with $78 and a duffel bag. I wasn't a farmer. I wasn't a fighter. I was a survivor, and survivors take the easy way out. They take the money. "I need to see it first," I heard myself say. "The farm, before I decide." Mr. Davies studied my face for a long moment. I expected him to argue, to tell me I was being foolish. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "I thought you might say that," he said. Thomas was stubborn too. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a bus schedule and another, smaller envelope. "The town is called Havenwood. It's about a 5-hour ride from here. The bus leaves in an hour. This," he said, pushing the envelope toward me, "is a personal loan. From me. $500. For your expenses while you get your bearings. You can pay me back when you sell the property." I stared at the money, then back at him. "Why are you doing this?" "Let's just say I'm honoring a promise to an old friend," he said, his expression unreadable. "He wanted you to have a choice, Ilara. A real one. Go see the place. See how it feels. The offer from Petrocorp will still be on the table next week." I took the money, the keys, and the bus schedule. As I stood to leave, my hand on the doorknob, I turned back. "Mr. Davies, did my grandfather ever say why he wouldn't sell? Did he tell you anything?" The lawyer looked out the window at the sprawling, indifferent city. "He said the land had a debt to pay," he murmured, almost to himself, "and that some things are worth more than their price." I never fully understood what he meant. The bus ride was a slow-motion transition from one world to another. The city, with its sharp angles and concrete canyons, gradually bled away, replaced by sprawling suburbs that in turn softened into rolling hills and farmland. I sat with my forehead pressed against the cool glass of the window, watching the world unspool. The $500 from Mr. Davies was a tight, secure roll in my pocket. It felt different from the state's $78. This was an advance on a future, not a settlement for a past. It felt like trust. For the first few hours, my mind raced. $350,000. The number felt unreal, like a typo. I tried to imagine what I would do with it. Buy a small, clean apartment, a reliable car. I could enroll in community college, study photography like I'd always dreamed of. I could be anonymous, normal. No one would know I was a girl from a group home, a girl whose past was a collection of sealed files in a county courthouse. The thought was so seductive, so powerful, it was almost painful. It was a clean slate. But underneath the fantasy, a stubborn question lingered. Why did he keep it? An old, dilapidated farm that was costing him everything. He could have sold it years ago, lived his final years in comfort, and left me a tidy savings account. It would have been the logical thing to do, the sensible thing. My grandfather had been a lot of things, quiet, kind, sad, but I never remembered him as illogical. There was a reason. I had to know what it was. The bus groaned into the station at Havenwood just as the sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of bruised purple and orange. The town was little more than a wide spot in the road, a single main street with a diner, a general store, a post office, and a handful of other storefronts, most of them dark. It was quiet, the kind of deep, ringing quiet I hadn't heard in years. The air smelled of wood smoke and cold, damp earth. It smelled real. There were no taxis. I walked into the diner, the bell above the door announcing my arrival with a cheerful jingle. A woman with a kind, tired face was wiping down the counter. She looked up and smiled. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am," I said, hoisting my duffel bag higher on my shoulder. "I need to get out to the old Vance place. Do you know it?" Her smile faltered for a second. "Tommy's place? Sure. It's a ways out. Been empty a long time." She looked me over, her gaze lingering on my worn-out jeans and the exhaustion I knew was plain on my face. "You family?" "His granddaughter," I said. Her expression softened completely. "Well, I'll be. He talked about you. My husband, Earl, can give you a ride. He's just finishing up his coffee." A large man in a flannel shirt and a baseball cap grunted in acknowledgement from a corner booth. 15 minutes later, I was in the passenger seat of a rattling pickup truck, heading out of town as the last of the light faded from the sky. "Place has been sitting," Earl said, his voice a low rumble. "Kids get in there sometimes, but mostly people leave it be. Shame what happened to Tommy. He was a good man. Quiet. Kept to himself, especially near the end." "Did you know him well?" I asked. "As well as anyone, I suppose. He used to come into the diner every Sunday. After he moved to the city to be near you, we didn't see him much. Heard he was having a hard time, financially. A lot of folks tried to get him to sell the farm, especially lately." He gestured with his thumb out the window. "That new oil company, Petrocorp, they bought up everything. The Miller farm, the old Henderson ranch, all of it. Thousands of acres. Your granddad's place is the last holdout." We turned off the paved road onto a gravel one that was heavily rutted. The truck's headlights cut a tunnel through the darkness, illuminating a line of tall, skeletal trees. In the distance, I could see a strange, flickering orange glow against the night sky and hear a low, persistent hum, like a giant machine breathing. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. "That's them," Earl said, his voice tight with disapproval. "Petrocorp. They've been working 24/7 for a month. Got a big drilling rig up on the ridge. Lights up the whole valley. Some folks are happy about the money they paid, but I don't know. It don't feel right. The truck slowed and turned onto an even smaller, unpaved lane, so overgrown that branches scraped against the windows. And then we were there. The truck's headlights fell upon a 2-story farmhouse, its white paint peeling and gray in the gloom. The porch sagged dramatically to one side, and several windows were dark, empty eyes. A massive oak tree stood beside it, its bare branches like crooked arms reaching for the roof. It looked haunted. It looked abandoned. But as Earl put the truck in park and the engine idled, I felt a strange, impossible flicker of recognition. I had been here before. This was home. Earl helped me with my bag and offered to wait, but I told him I'd be fine. I didn't want him to see me if the keys didn't work, or if I broke down crying on the porch. He hesitated, then gave me his card. Call if you need anything, a ride, a hot meal, anything. Shirley would have my hide if I left Tommy Vance's granddaughter out here alone. He drove away, his taillights disappearing down the lane, leaving me in an ocean of darkness and silence, broken only by the distant hum of the drilling rig. The air was cold and sharp. I stood there for a long time, just looking at the house. It was bigger than I remembered, and sadder. It looked like it was sinking back into the earth. I walked up the creaking wooden steps, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. The front door was paint-stuck and swollen. I put my shoulder into it, and it groaned open with a shudder. The air that rushed out was stale and cold, thick with the scent of dust, decay, and the faint, ghostly perfume of my grandfather's pipe tobacco. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, plunging the house into absolute blackness. I fumbled along the wall, my fingers searching for a light switch. They found one, and with a click, a single, bare bulb in the hallway flickered on, casting a weak, yellow glow. The house was a time capsule. Furniture was draped in white sheets, looking like a congregation of ghosts. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light. A thick layer of dust covered every surface. In the living room, a gallery of faded rectangles on the wallpaper showed where pictures once hung. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my footsteps leaving tracks in the dust. The kitchen, with its ancient-looking stove and yellow linoleum floor. The dining room, where a heavy wooden table sat cloaked in its sheet. It was all so still, so quiet. It felt less like a house and more like a tomb. But it was my tomb. The thought wasn't as morbid as it sounded. It was a statement of fact. This place, this history, this decay, it belonged to me. Upstairs, I found the bedrooms. One was clearly my grandfather's. A simple iron bed frame, a tall wooden dresser. On the bedside table sat a pair of reading glasses and a book, a layer of dust preserving the scene. The other bedroom was smaller. It had pale blue wallpaper with little yellow flowers. There was a single twin bed, and on the wall, a faint pencil mark with a date next to it. Ilara, age 5. My throat tightened. He'd kept it for me. All these years he'd kept my room. It was too much. I sat on the edge of the dusty mattress and finally let myself cry. I cried for my grandfather, who died alone. I cried for the little girl who had to leave this room. And I cried for the 18-year-old woman sitting in the dark, with no idea what to do next. After a while, the tears stopped. I was just cold and tired. I knew I couldn't stay. The sensible thing was to walk back to town in the morning, call Mr. Davies, and tell him to accept the offer. Take the money and run. Never look back. I stood up, ready to go back downstairs and find a place to sleep on one of the sheet-covered sofas. But as I turned, my eyes caught something. On the top of the tall dresser in my grandfather's room, almost hidden in the shadows, was a small, locked metal box. It wasn't dusty like everything else. It was clean, as if it had been wiped down recently. Or placed there recently. My heart started to beat a little faster. I tried the lid, but it was locked tight. There was no key. I looked around the room, my gaze falling on the bedside table. No key. I checked the drawers of the dresser, old shirts, socks, the smell of cedar. No key. I was about to give up when I remembered the set of keys Mr. Davies had given me. There were 3 of them on the ring. 2 large, old-fashioned iron keys. One for the front door, one probably for the back, and a third, smaller, brass-colored key. It looked like a key for a diary or a cash box. With a trembling hand, I retrieved the keys from my pocket. I tried the small brass key in the lock of the metal box. It slid in perfectly. I turned it, and with a soft, satisfying click, the lock sprang open. I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of yellowed cotton, were 2 things. The first was a thick stack of letters, tied together with a piece of faded twine. The second was a single, folded piece of paper. I picked up the folded paper first. My name was written on the outside in my grandfather's familiar, spidery handwriting. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. It was a letter. From him. "My dearest Dilara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have come home. I am so sorry I had to leave you. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you and prayed for your safety. I hope the world has been kinder to you than I fear it has. You must have so many questions. Why I kept this old place. Why I didn't sell it and leave you with something easier, something more practical. The truth is, I couldn't. This land, this farm, it holds a promise. And a secret. I need you to understand it before you make any decisions. You have no doubt heard about the oil company. They will offer you a great deal of money for this land. It will be a tempting offer, a sum that could change your life. And it is your right to take it. I will not haunt you from the great beyond if you do. You deserve a good life, a safe life, and I will have failed you if you don't get one. But before you decide, I need you to know what you would be selling. It's not just 80 acres of dirt and rock. It's not just this old house. There's something else here, something I chose to protect, even at great cost to myself. There is an old well on the north pasture, near the big cluster of birch trees. It's not on any official map. I capped it myself 30 years ago. It's hidden, but you can find it if you look. Under the cap, there's another container. It holds the rest of the story. Find it, Alara. Read what's there. Understand what I sacrificed. And why. Whatever you choose, know that I love you more than words can say. Be strong. Be brave. Be happy. Your loving grandfather, Thomas. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through a fresh wave of tears. A secret, a promise. An old well. It felt like something out of a book, not real life. The stack of other letters in the box was old, the paper brittle. They were from my grandmother to him, written long before I was born. Love letters from a time when this house was full of life. He had kept them all these years. He was a man who held on to things. I carefully placed his letter back in the box and closed the lid. The sensible plan to sell and run was gone. Evaporated like mist. I couldn't leave now. Not until I knew. Not until I found that well. The next morning, I woke up on the sofa, stiff and cold, with a dusty sheet for a blanket. Sunlight streamed through the dirty windows, illuminating the decay in stark detail. The house looked even worse in the light of day. But it also looked possible. I made a list. Food. Cleaning supplies, a map of the property. I found a local plat map in a desk drawer, a brittle, yellowed document showing the boundaries of the Vance farm. The north pasture was a large, amorphous blob at the top of the page. I put the map in my pocket, locked the front door behind me, and started the long walk into town. The world looked different now. The distant hum of the oil rig wasn't just a nuisance, it was a threat. The rolling hills weren't just pretty, they were the land Petrocorp had bought, a tightening vice around my small piece of the world. In Havenwood, I went to the general store. The man behind the counter, a Mr. Henderson, recognized my name immediately. "Tommy's girl," he said, nodding. "Heard you were in town. About time someone showed that old place some love." I bought bread, cheese, a few cans of soup, buckets, sponges, and a pair of sturdy work gloves. As I paid, I asked him, "Do you know anything about an old well on my grandfather's property, in the north pasture?" He scratched his beard, thinking. "Don't think so. I know he had the main well dug for the house back in the 70s. But the north pasture, that's mostly just rock and scrub. Never farmed it, too hilly. Why you asking?" "Just curious," I said, not wanting to reveal anything. "Heard a story once." Back at the house, I spent the rest of the day cleaning. I scrubbed the kitchen until the yellow linoleum gleamed. I washed the windows, letting in more and more light. With every bit of dust I wiped away, every sheet I folded, the house felt less like a tomb and more like a home that had just been sleeping. It felt like I was waking it up. That evening, as I ate a can of cold soup, another vehicle came down the lane. This one wasn't a rattling pickup. It was a brand new, spotlessly clean white SUV with a logo on the side. A stylized blue and green globe with the word Petrocore underneath. My stomach clenched. A man in a crisp suit and shiny shoes got out. He had a smile that was all teeth and a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. He looked completely out of place against the backdrop of the peeling paint and sagging porch. "Miss Vance?" he called out, his voice smooth and confident. "My name is Mark Calloway. I'm with Petrocorp." I didn't invite him in. I met him on the porch, crossing my arms over my chest. "I know who you are," I said. "Just wanted to stop by and welcome you to the neighborhood," he said, his smile unwavering. "And to follow up on our standing offer. I'm authorized to tell you that, to expedite things, we can increase the offer to $400,000. We can have the paperwork drawn up by tomorrow and the money in your account by the end of the week." $400,000. The number hung in the air between us. It was an absurd amount of money, life-changing. The easy way out, gift-wrapped and hand-delivered. This is the part of the story where it gets hard. This is the part where you're faced with a choice that defines you. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've had to choose between what's easy and what's right, between a paycheck and a principle. If you know what that feels like, if you've ever had to stand your ground when you were terrified, let me know in the comments. Your stories matter. They remind us we're not alone in these fights. Now, let's get back to what happened on that porch. I looked at his polished shoes, then at the dirt under my own fingernails from cleaning my grandfather's house. I thought about the letter, the secret, the promise. "I'm not interested," I said. The words felt solid, real. Calloway's smile tightened just a fraction. "Miss Vance, perhaps you don't understand the situation. We are moving forward with our project. There will be heavy machinery, constant noise, access roads. Your property value will plummet. This is the best offer you will ever receive. In fact, it's vastly more than the land is worth." His tone had shifted. The friendliness was gone, replaced by a thin veneer of condescending patience. He was trying to intimidate me. "I heard you the first time," I said, my voice steady. "The answer is no. This is my property. Please leave." For a second, I thought he was going to argue more, but he just gave a short, humorless laugh. "Have it your way," he said, his eyes cold. "The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, we'll proceed through other means. We have a schedule to keep." He got back in his shiny SUV and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. I stood on the porch, my heart hammering against my ribs, until the sound of his engine faded, replaced once again by the relentless hum from the ridge. Other means. The threat was clear. They would try to force me out, one way or another. I had 48 hours. The next morning, I was up before dawn. I put on the sturdiest clothes I had, pulled on the work gloves, and with the old plat map in my pocket, I headed for the north pasture. My grandfather's letter was a weight in my mind. Find the well. The pasture was a wild, overgrown expanse of rolling, rocky ground, thick with thorny bushes and tangled weeds. The birch trees he'd mentioned were a pale, ghostly cluster on a rise in the distance, maybe a mile away. It was slow going. Briars tore at my jeans, and the uneven ground threatened to twist my ankle with every step. The sun rose higher, and I started to sweat. The hum from the Petrocorp rig was louder here, a constant, oppressive drone that vibrated in my teeth. It felt like a countdown. After nearly 2 hours of pushing through the undergrowth, I finally reached the stand of birch trees. Their white bark was peeling in papery strips. I stood among them, scanning the ground. It all looked the same, a carpet of dead leaves, rocks, and weeds. There was no sign of a well, no break in the landscape. I started searching in a systematic grid, walking back and forth, my eyes glued to the ground. Doubt began to creep in. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe the well had been destroyed, or buried completely. Maybe this was all a wild goose chase, a sentimental fantasy. I was tired, scratched up, and losing hope. I sat down on a large, flat rock to catch my breath, feeling the deep ache of despair. I was just a kid. What was I doing out here, chasing a ghost? I should have taken the money. I was about to give up and head back to the house when my eyes fell on the rock I was sitting on. It was too flat, too perfectly circular. Its edges were almost machine-cut, not jagged and natural like the other rocks scattered around. I knelt and ran my gloved hand over its surface. It was cold, smooth stone, but it didn't feel like a rock. It felt like concrete. My heart leaped. I started pulling at the weeds and digging away the dirt packed around its edges. It was hard work. My fingers were raw, my muscles screaming. But slowly, the outline became clear. It was a massive, circular concrete cap, at least 5 feet in diameter, set perfectly flush with the ground. It was so expertly hidden, so overgrown, that you would never find it unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Or unless you happened to sit on it. I found what looked like a recessed iron handle set into the concrete and cleared the dirt away from it. I pulled. It didn't budge. I pulled again, bracing my feet, putting my entire body weight into it. It was impossibly heavy. It was then that I noticed a small, metal hook attached to the side of the handle. It looked like something you'd attach a chain or a winch to. My grandfather hadn't just capped the well, he'd sealed it. He didn't intend for it to be opened by hand. Frustration and panic started to set in. I had found it, but I couldn't open it. The 48-hour deadline was ticking away. I sat back on my heels, defeated. What now? I looked around wildly, as if the solution would just appear, and then I saw it. A few feet away, at the base of the largest birch tree, was a loose pile of rocks that looked out of place. It wasn't a natural formation. It was a small cairn, deliberately stacked. I scrambled over and started pulling the rocks away. Underneath them was a patch of soft, damp earth. I dug with my bare hands, tearing at the soil and roots. About a foot down, my fingers hit something hard and rectangular. It was another metal box, just like the one in the bedroom, but this one was larger, heavier, and sealed with rust. I hauled it out of the hole. It was a military-style ammunition can, painted olive drab. On the side, my grandfather had stenciled one word: evidence. I spent a frantic half-hour prying the rusted latches open with a sharp rock, my knuckles bleeding. Finally, with a groan of tortured metal, the lid came off. The contents were wrapped in oilcloth. I carefully unwrapped the bundle. Inside was not a letter, but a thick binder, the kind lawyers use. The first page was a geological survey report, dated 30 years ago. The title read, Hydrogeological Assessment of the Vance Property Artesian Aquifer. I flipped through the pages. They were filled with charts, diagrams, and technical jargon I didn't understand. But I understood the summary on the final page. I had to read it twice to believe it. The old well wasn't an oil well. It wasn't a dry hole. It was a deep, powerful artesian spring. The report described a massive, pristine underground aquifer of incredibly pure water, forced to the surface by geological pressure. It estimated the flow rate at over 500 gallons per minute. It was a renewable, inexhaustible source of fresh water, a geological anomaly in a region known for its mineral-heavy, brackish groundwater. Tucked into the back of the binder was a second letter from my grandfather. This one was different. The handwriting was angrier, more urgent. Alara, now you know. It's not oil under this farm. It's water, more clean water than this whole county has ever seen. When I had that survey done, I thought it was a blessing. I thought it would save the farm. I was wrong. It became a curse. I took these findings to a water bottling company. They were ecstatic. They drew up a contract. But then their lawyers got involved. They wanted to buy the land, not just the water rights. They wanted to put in a massive industrial bottling plant with dozens of tanker trucks a day, running day and night. They wanted to drain it as fast as they could, with no regard for the long-term health of the aquifer. It would have destroyed this place. The peace, the quiet, everything. It would have turned our home into a factory. I refused. So they tried to take it. They lobbied the county, claiming it was a vital resource that should be managed by a corporation for the public good. They tried to use eminent domain. I fought them. It took every penny I had, and then some, but I won. I proved the aquifer was contained entirely on my property, and that I had the sole right to it. After I beat them, I knew others would come. The world is getting thirstier, Ilara. That water is worth more than oil, and it will only get more valuable. But its value to a corporation is just money. Its real value is life. I couldn't bear to see it packaged in plastic and sold. So I made a choice. I hired a crew, told them I was capping a dry oil well, and I sealed it. I buried the research. I let the farm fall into debt. I let people think I was a fool, a stubborn old man sitting on worthless land. It was the only way I could think of to protect it, to let it rest. Now the oil vultures have come. Petrocorp. They're drilling, they're fracking. It's a death sentence for the aquifer. The chemicals they use will leach into the groundwater. They'll poison it. Permanently. They don't know it's there. The geological formations that hold the oil are far deeper than the aquifer. They see the water as a nuisance, something to be drilled through and contained. They will destroy a priceless resource without even knowing it exists. This is my legacy to you, Alara. Not a fortune, but a burden. A choice. In this box is all the proof. The original survey, the water quality tests, my legal filings against the bottling company. It's undeniable. You have two paths. You can take this evidence public. It will cause a firestorm. Environmental groups, the state, the media, they will all get involved. Petrocorp's project will be halted, maybe for years. You will be at the center of a very ugly, very public fight. They will try to discredit you, to bury you in legal fees. You will not be safe. Or, you can do nothing. You can take their money. $400,000 is a fortune. You could disappear, start a new life, and never think of this place again. No one would blame you. I wouldn't blame you. The choice is yours. Protect the water or protect yourself. I'm sorry to put this on you. I just prayed you'd have the strength I'm not sure I had. Love, Thomas. I sat there in the dirt, the binder in my lap, the hum of the rig on the ridge sounding like a monster chewing up the world. He hadn't been a fool. He had been a guardian. He hadn't let the farm fail out of neglect. He had sacrificed it as camouflage. The debt, the decay, the isolation, it was all a shield, hiding something pure and vital. And now the shield was gone, and I was the only thing standing in the way. The choice he laid out was brutal. my safety and future versus a legacy of water and principle. A quiet life or a war. I looked at his letter, at the desperate, loving scrawl. He'd fought this battle once, and it had broken him. Now he was asking me to fight it again. I thought of the sterile hallways of the group home. The feeling of being small, powerless, a number in a file. I thought of the $78 in the manila envelope. All my life, I had been told what to do, where to go, who to be. All my life, I had survived by being quiet and invisible. Taking the money was the smart play. It was the survivor's play. But as I sat there, with the cool metal of the evidence box under my hands and the smell of the damp earth in the air, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about water. It was about a promise. It was about a grandfather who believed in his granddaughter enough to trust her with the most important secret of his life. It was about choosing who I was going to be. Was I going to be the scared orphan from the system, always looking for the easy way out? Or was I going to be Thomas Vance's granddaughter, the owner of these 80 acres, the guardian of what lay beneath them? I stood up and brushed the dirt from my jeans. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But underneath it, there was something else. Something hard and clear. A decision. I packed the binder and the letter back into the ammunition can. It was heavy, but it wasn't a burden anymore. It was a weapon. I walked back to the house, my steps sure and steady. The hum of the rig didn't sound like a countdown anymore. It sounded like a challenge. That evening, I called Mr. Davies. I explained everything. The well, the aquifer, the evidence. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My God," he finally said, his voice full of awe. So that's what he meant. A debt to pay. He wasn't talking about money. "They gave me a 48-hour deadline," I said. "They threatened to use other means. They'll likely file for an injunction, citing their operational needs, or try to get the county to condemn a right-of-way through your property," he said, his voice all business now. "It'll be messy, but this changes everything. This isn't just a property dispute anymore. This is a major environmental issue." "What do I do?" I asked. "You have the proof, Alara. That's the key. Don't talk to them. Don't answer any more questions. I'm going to make a call. There's an environmental law group I've worked with. They specialize in this kind of fight. They're bulldogs. But are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no going back. Their $400,000 offer will turn into a $1 million lawsuit against you." I looked out the window of the clean kitchen, at the old oak tree standing guard over the house. "Some things are worth more than their price," I said, quoting my grandfather. I heard Mr. Davies smile through the phone. "Thomas would be so proud of you," he said. "I'll call you back within the hour." The next days were a blur. True to his word, Mr. Davies connected me with the Riverwood Conservancy, an environmental legal aid group. A woman named Anya Sharma, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who seemed to run on coffee and righteous fury, drove out to the farm. I showed her the well. I gave her the evidence box. She read my grandfather's letters, her expression grim. "They're not just going to contaminate it," she said, tapping the geological survey. "Their drilling plan, if it's standard for this shale formation, will likely fracture the confining layer of the aquifer. It won't just poison the water, it could depressurize the entire system. It could be gone forever." The fight began. Anya filed an emergency injunction, citing the evidence from my grandfather's binder. Petrocorp's lawyers responded immediately, calling the claims frivolous and unsubstantiated, a desperate attempt by a lone landowner to extort money. They publicly painted me as a greedy, delusional girl. A local newspaper ran a story with the headline, "Orphan Holdout Halts County Progress." The town was divided. Some people, like Earl and Shirley from the diner, brought me groceries and offered words of encouragement. Others, who had taken Petrocorp's money or were hoping for jobs, looked at me with open hostility. Trucks would slow down as they passed my lane, their drivers glaring at the house. One night, someone threw a rock through the front window. I was terrified. There were many nights I lay awake, listening to the house creak, convinced I had made a terrible mistake. I would think of the $400,000, of the quiet, easy life I had thrown away. The doubt was a physical ache. But then I would walk through the rooms of the house, which were slowly starting to feel like mine. I'd found a box of my grandfather's photography, beautiful black and white images of the land, the trees, the sky. I saw the love he had for this place. I would hold the small wooden bird he carved for me, its smooth surface a connection to his hands, his promise, and my resolve would harden again. The turning point came a few weeks later. Anya had arranged for an independent hydrogeologist to come and, with a court order, unseal and test the well. A small crowd gathered at the end of my lane. Reporters, Petrocorp executives in their suits, a few curious locals. It took a crane to lift the concrete cap. When it came free, there was a collective gasp. A column of crystal-clear water erupted from the ground, shooting 20 feet into the air before falling back on itself. A fountain of pure, clean life. It wasn't a trickle, it was a geyser. The geologist's tests confirmed everything. The water was exceptionally pure, and the flow rate was even higher than the original survey had predicted. It was all true. The story exploded. It was picked up by state and national news. The image of that fountain of water in the middle of a potential oil field was powerful. Petrocorp's narrative of a greedy landowner collapsed. They were now the villains, a faceless corporation about to destroy a priceless natural wonder. The state's Environmental Protection Agency stepped in. Petrocorp's permits were suspended indefinitely, pending a full environmental impact review. Their drilling rig on the ridge went silent. The oppressive hum that had been the soundtrack to my life for weeks was suddenly gone. The silence was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The fight is far from over. Petrocorp has an army of lawyers and they haven't given up. But now, I'm not alone. The Riverwood Conservancy is representing me pro bono. A crowdfunding campaign started by Earl and Shirley has raised money for my living expenses and the back taxes. People from all over the country, people who have fought their own battles against big companies, send letters of support. The house is no longer just a house. The farm is no longer just land. It's a symbol. It's my home. I spend my days working on the property, clearing brush, fixing fences, painting the porch. I'm learning slowly how to be a caretaker. I'm learning what it means to inherit something that isn't measured in dollars, but in responsibility. My grandfather left me a choice, and in making it, I found a purpose. I found my own strength. He didn't leave me an inheritance, he left me a legacy. And that's a lesson I think we can all learn from. We all inherit things, not just property or money, but stories, values, secrets, and sometimes burdens. What we do with them is what defines us. What have you inherited? What battle are you fighting, big or small, that feels impossible? Share your story in the comments below. This channel is a community for people who understand that the most valuable things in life are rarely the easiest. Your story matters. And if you want to be a part of this community, to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places, make sure you subscribe. We're in this together.
And Sandy, once you complete like the story in that area, you'll be able to move water. Oh my god, it's Mimikyu. I really must upgrade habitats. All my mons are living in their basic habitats mostly. I feel bad. I need to do that as well, Koopy. Okay, cool. We found Mimikyu. That's cute. Okay, there's Hariyama. Oh, there's a. Oh my god, that means there's somebody on the cruise ship. Okay, let's go to the SSN. I forgot we set that up for Kadabra. That's exciting. Guys, I'm getting a computer this year. I'm manifesting it now, okay? Ellie, I'm manifesting that for you too. That's so exciting. Hey. Uh oh, hi Standay. Good to see you. Okay, there's Kadabra. Perfect. I'm just gonna move this right here. Actually, I'm gonna move that to the corner. There we go. Okay. Got one of those. A campsite. We just need a fire and 2 beds. Oh, straw stool and a straw table. Okay.